Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to bring you the Vision video. What if I guess today are the 3 ultimate builds for PvE. As of right now, these are going to be builds that I personally like using and I personally use in PvE. And they are builds most of you guys can probably make. They're not just classified 6-piece this or 6-piece that. They are going to be kind of hybrid builds, but they're also going to be builds that, as I said, you can use for PvE and have a lot of success with them. Right now, in the comments or in the description, you guys can check out, there's going to be 3 different timestamps. I'm going to show 3 different builds, as I said. The first one is going to be a tank build, so if you guys want to be a bit more tanky for PvE, if you have trouble kind of staying alive in legendary missions or incursions, you guys can check that build out. The second one I do have is a kind of skill power electronics build. You guys can check that out if you want to use, sticky bombs or this or that. The final one we have is a damage build, and this is a straight up build if you want to pick up a weapon and pretty much do a lot of DPS for your team. If you want to be that primary guy on your team, doing all the damage to the bosses or the NPCs, this build is for you. So as I said, check out the description, check out the comments down below for the timestamps for the specific times in the video. But if you guys want to watch the entire thing, I do really appreciate that. So yeah, enough with the chit-chatting. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting off first, I'm going to show you guys my tank build, so this is it. As you guys can see, it is a 6-piece classified D3 FNC build, and this in my opinion is the best PvE build. If you want to be a tank, if you want to be not affected by anything or anyone on the map, this is the build for you. As I said, if you have trouble staying alive, if you have trouble completing legendary missions, incursions, whatever the case is, this build is for you. The first thing I do want to show you guys are the weapons and what I'm using. So yes, I am using the house. You guys don't have to use this at all. If you don't have this, it is okay. You can use something like the Navy MP5N. The PP19 is really good as well since it has a lot of bullets. But as I said, I'm using the house because I have one and this one is pretty good. As for the talents, I'm using Deadly, Predatory, and Exotic card counter talents. In my mind, Predatory is really good for this build, especially if you don't like relying on your medkits. That's something I really do in PvE. I don't really kind of focus on how many medkits I have. I don't like using them. Let's just say that I just kind of have them for emergency situations. It might sound weird, I understand that, but I like using my immune station or my station, or I like using Predatory on my weapons, so I'm kind of, getting that health back, and even if I get shot in the back, even if, I get double teamed, whatever the case is, I have that Predatory running in the background and I'm getting some health back. As for the weapon mods, you want to go everything into critical hit damage for the weapon. It's really simple and really self-explanatory. And then for the secondary, I'm just using a lightweight M4. I'm not really going to go over that weapon because, as I said, we're really just focusing on the build and the specifics of the primary. Before I actually move into the gear, I do want to show you guys another version of this build. If you don't have classified versions, if you don't have the 6-piece, you can make this with a ninja bike backpack. It's really simple. So all you have to do is use 3 defense, 1 ninja bike backpack, 1 nomad, and something like final measures for the EDR, or you can use something a little bit different. It's really up to you, but this is pretty much the alternative version of this build, as I said, if you don't have the 6-piece. Now getting back to the gear, so for the chest piece, I'm using stamina, enemy armor damage, exotic damage resilience, and ammo capacity. As for the mods, I'm using 2 firearms and skill power mods, and the reason I do have skill power is because with this build, you have to get over 123,000 skill power just so your shield is maxed out, and it's pretty much the tankiest it can be in the game. For the mask, I'm using stamina, skill power, damage to leads, and for the mod, I'm actually using a stamina and skill power mod, and the reason I do have stamina is just so I can get over the 9,000 mark and get my shield even better and make it more powerful. Moving down to the knee pads, I'm using stamina, critical hit damage, damage to leads, disarm resistance, and increased kill XP, and for the mods I'm using a firearms and skill power mod with a 4% ballistic shield damage mod. Next up for the backpack, we have stamina once again. This time we have skill power, bleed resistance, and for the mods, we have a firearms and skill power mod with 2 4% ballistic shield damage mods. For my gloves, I'm using critical hit damage, SMG damage, enemy armor damage, and stamina once again. Last but not least, for the holster, I do have reload speed, and this is personal preference. I feel like I don't reload quite fast enough, and I do want to get hurried on my weapon, but then I can't really give up Predatory, and I also want to do a bit more damage with the weapon, so it's kind of like a decision in my head. As I said, it's personal preference. I like using reload speed just so I can reload a little bit quicker and put out more DPS. So if you don't want to use this, it is okay. You can use critical hit chance, you can use health. it's really up to you. The final thing I do want to show you guys are the abilities. So I'm actually using a support station, but this is actually the ammo crate. And the one thing with this build is I run out of ammo really quick. Although I have ammo capacity attributes on my gear, I still run out of ammo. So that's why I'm using this. If you have someone in your group using Reclaimer, it is okay. You can switch this to like a pulse or you know, a flashbang, whatever the case is. But if you're not running with a Reclaimer person, I would 100% recommend using this. For the shield, I'm actually using the Assault Shield. I've been using this forever, and as you guys can see on my health, it is at 2.35 million, which is, you know, pretty much maxed out in the game. Lastly, for the talents, I'm using Adrenaline, Critical Save, Precision, and On the Move. Up next, I have my high skill power / electronics build, and this build is mainly for legendary missions, for missions that you kind of want to do by yourself. You know, HVT, stuff like that. If you want to do this by yourself and not have to worry about shooting all the enemies, stuff like that, this build is perfect. You can just put down your flame turret and let it do all the work. So as I said, this is pretty much the way I set up this build. So really quickly, for the weapon, I'm actually using a lightweight M4, and for the talent, I'm using Competent, Talented, and Determined. This is by far the god roll kind of talent you want on a skill power build. Competent for the weapon damage, Talented for the extra skill power, and also Determined to pretty much give you, you know, your cooldowns a little bit quicker and get your flame turret or your heal, whatever the case is. For the weapon mods, I'm actually spec'd all into headshot damage. Now, the reason I did that is because, as you guys can see, I'm not even sitting at 3000 firearms, and I'm not doing any weapon damage at all as it is. So instead of like focusing on body shots and instead of focusing on critical hit chance and critical hit damage, I put everything into headshot damage just so I can do a bit more damage in the head and help out my team a bit more. As I said, it's personal preference. If you guys don't like using headshot damage, you know, scope or suppressor on console, it's really up to you. You could use whatever you want. Heading over to the main part of the video, and that is the gear and what I'm using on it. So really quickly, for my gear mods, I'm actually using all purple damage elites with electronics on this build. The reason why is because I'm actually doing a bit more damage by about 2.5k or almost 3k with my flame turret with these mods rather than electronics and skill power mods. I know it's kind of surprising, but I did my test. I was testing this out on Lexington, I was testing this out on some legendary missions, and pretty much like 2.5k, almost 3k, no matter if I'm stacked at 30% with my tactician or not, I'm doing a bit more damage. So I'm using these mods, you know, just to pretty much benefit the build and myself. As for the prototype mods, I'm actually using 3.50% turret damage mods, and this is pretty much to make my flame turret a bit stronger and hopefully melt the NPCs way faster. Heading over to the chest piece, so for my chest piece I'm using electronics, enemy armor damage, skill haste, and ammo capacity. Pretty simple over here. For the mask we're using electronics once again with enemy armor damage and disorient resistance. A lot of people ask me why I would go with enemy armor damage instead of skill power. Honestly, I just want my turret to do a bit more damage and melt the shields from the NPCs way faster. The skill power is good, but the skill power is not going to increase your turret damage by that much. It's only 10k. So that's why I'm using enemy armor damage. It's really up to you. You guys can kind of look it up and stuff like that. But I always pretty much used enemy armor damage whenever I did this build before, and it always kind of worked out for me. As for the knee pads, we're using electronics once again with skill power, burn resistance, damage elites, and blindside death resistance. The one thing I didn't mention actually on the mask is I'm actually missing damage elites, and this is kind of unfortunate. I cannot get a better mask. For some reason, I just can't get it to drop. So if I did have damage elites on this build would be even better. But unfortunately, it's not happening as of right now. So it is what it is. Heading over to the backpack, we're using the Ninja Bug backpack, obviously with electronics, skill power, disrupt resistance, and that's pretty much it for the backpack. For the gloves, we're using skill power, assault rifle damage, skill haste, enemy armor damage, and last but not least for the holster, I'm using skill haste again. This build is mainly focused on the flame turret. The way I kind of set it up, I do have 40% skill haste on this build and I could go a bit more into it, but honestly there's no point. I already have Determined on my weapon. I'm also using triage as one of my talents, and honestly I get my flame turret before it even gets destroyed, before it even gets expired. I already have another one in my back pocket, so there's really no point of me going a bit more into skill haste. The final thing, I do want to go over my abilities. So really quickly, I'm actually using a overdose. As you guys can see, it's pretty good. 315,000 self-heal and 177,000 ally heal, and I get it back in about 21 seconds. As for the flame turret, I'm doing 16.6k damage, pretty much standard without anything, without my stacks, anything like that, without talented activated. I'm doing 16.6k, and I get it back in 24 seconds, which is, as I said, very, very fast. For the talents, I'm actually using Triage, Critical Save, Wildfire, and I'm also using Tech Support. Tech Support, really, really important. This actually kind of makes your flame turret last longer, so you don't have to kind of keep putting it down and, you know, breaking it, stuff like that. It's just going to sit there as soon as you put it and you get kills with your weapon or the turret. It's just going to sit there for a way, way longer time. Last but not least, we have our damage/DPS build, and as I said in the beginning, this is a build you can kind of put together, pick up a weapon, and just melt all the enemies in your sight, and it just does a lot of damage in general. So for my weapon, I'm actually using the MDR, and for the talents, I do have Unforgiving, Vicious, and the Distracted talents. I do like Unforgiving on this gun, and this build, Vicious, is really good as well, because with this build, you tend to kind of sit back, be kind of behind your teammate, be behind cover, and you're most likely going to be full health all the time, so the Vicious talent is pretty much going to be active all the time, which is going to give you a bit more crit chance, which is really, really good. For the weapon mods, I'm using everything headshot damage. You know, this is a sentry build, this is a MDR build, so you're obviously going to focus on headshot damage, and that's pretty much what you want to spec into with this weapon. So heading over to the actual build, I do want to show you guys my gear mods first. So I'm actually using all firearms and health mods on this build, just so I can be a bit more tanky, and obviously with the firearms, I can get a bit more weapon damage. And then for my prototype mods, I'm actually using the 3.5% turret damage mods. So with the chest piece, I'm using stamina, health, enemy armor damage, and ammo capacity. Pretty simple. With the mask, you guys want to go into firearms, enemy armor damage, and damage to elites. For the knee pads, I'm using stamina, health, bleed resistance, damage to elites, blindside death resistance, and once again, you always want to focus for PvE to have damage to elites on both your mask and your knee pads. For the backpack, I'm rocking with firearms, health, and burn resistance. Moving down to the gloves, we have assault rifle damage, enemy armor damage, and critical hit damage, and then once again stamina. And last but not least, for the holster, I'm using critical hit chance. Now, as you guys can see, I'm using 2 Nomad, and pretty much the Nomad is for kind of healing. With this build, you don't really have a lot of electronics and a lot of skill power, and you don't really have skill haste at all, so healing is a kind of problem, I would say. So that's why I'm using Nomad. Every time you get a kill, you get the 15% health on kill, and also it grants you a constant small amount of healing through combat, so you know it just helps you out there if you're kind of chilling back, and if you're one shot, instead of popping your mech kit, whatever, you could just kind of wait, and you know your Nomad is gonna pretty much give your health back instantly. If you're not a fan of using Nomad on this build, I would recommend using 2 pieces of Striker. 1, for the stability, it's gonna help out with your MDR accuracy, and 2, you're going to get the enemy armor damage, which once again is going to be very helpful for PvE. The final thing I do want to go over are my abilities and my talents. So really quickly, I'm using a immune station. I do switch this out between a immune station and a life support. It just really depends what mission I'm playing and if I have someone on my team using Reclaimer. If no one's using Reclaimer, then obviously you want to use a life support station, and so on and so forth. For the turret, I'm actually using a flame turret, and this is actually really, really good pairing up with an MDR. Because with a distracted talent, I'm actually getting 18% extra weapon damage whenever the enemies are on fire. So it's pretty much like a win-win situation. Not only am I getting more weapon damage, but I'm also getting better accuracy because of the flame turret and, you know, the NPCs kind of burning and standing still. Lastly, for the talents, I'm actually using Critical Save, Combat Medic, Strike Back, and Precision. I do have Combat Medic on this because with this build, I find myself a lot kind of sticking with a teammate kind of way back and shooting out of cover, and you know, obviously if I use a mech kit, I want to help my teammates out, so that's why I'm using it. Strike Back, pretty self-explanatory, Critical Save, and then Precision for the extra critical hit chance and critical hit damage whenever I hit headshots. So that is pretty much the build. Those are the 3 builds I would recommend using for PvE as of right now. You know, obviously you can use a 6-piece classified striker for PvE. It's not really hard, but I do understand there's a lot of players coming back because of the shields update, and you know, it's 1.8.2. So I want to make a little kind of different build guide for you guys and kind of help out those new players, those returning players, but also give you guys some tips if you are a veteran and see if you can make some changes to your build and kind of take something out of the video. But anyways, that is it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.